Let's talk about wide receivers that you should start or sit in week 4 of the fantasy football season. I'm going to go through all 32 teams, 16 matchups in total. You can pause your screen and go to a specific matchup now, or check out the description where the time codes are. Appreciate y'all for joining us. Here is a terminology I'm going to use throughout the video so you're familiar. And lastly, I'm guaranteeing a reply to the first 3 comments of every video this year, so make sure you're subscribed and you've turned your notifications on. Let's jump into Thursday Night Football, where we've got the Seahawks at the Cardinals. Now, here's how I view this matchup. Jackson Smith-Njigba is the only one that you should have confidence in, period. Okay? Cooper Kupp and Torrey Horton, these guys are starting to really eat at each other's roles. The emergence of a Torrey Horton is making it really hard to justify playing Cooper Kupp. Last week, for example, 2 targets for Cooper Kupp. What are you supposed to do with that? Now, to be fair, the Seahawks completely blew out the Saints, so they didn't really need to throw the ball. But outside of Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is a top 5 wide receiver for me this week, by the way, the Cardinals are a top 12 play for your wide receivers, giving up the 11th most points to wide receivers. Outside of that, I don't think you get cute with it. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, I was talking about this today in a live stream, but Marvin Harrison Jr., if I can be completely transparent with you, the viewer right now, I want you to know that there's not a single name in fantasy football right now that makes me more sick when I think about how I have to project them each and every week than a Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm sick to my stomach every time I have to talk about this guy because I know how talented he was as a prospect, but he's not living up to it. And it's not just Kyler Murray's fault, but that plays a part, and he's not playing well, and he's dropping passes. I have him as a spot start, which means that he's a flexible name. But here's what's not going in his favor this week. The Seahawks are the second worst matchup for your wide receivers. You want to attack the Seahawks on the ground. You don't want to attack them through the air. So unless you have a clear, better flex, you can play Marvin Harrison, but lower your expectations because it's really difficult right now to start him with any confidence. Let's move on to the London game. We've got the Vikings at the Steelers. Make sure you set your lineups early this week because this matchup might be happening before you wake up. Here's the bad news. This is the second lowest over-under of the week at 40.5 points. You got 2 teams traveling abroad. Typically, that does not help synergy and energy, for a game. So typically, these games are a little bit more defensive, or it goes either way. Now, here's the bad news for DK Metcalf and the Steelers. The Vikings are the worst matchup for fantasy wide receivers right now. They give up the fewest points to fantasy wide receivers. Now, unfortunately, with DK Metcalf, we were all kind of sold this dream that, well, Aaron Rodgers hyper targets his number 1. Unfortunately, Arthur Smith is running the show in Pittsburgh. That's evident by now because last week, DK Metcalf, despite running, 24 of 25 routes, was targeted just 5 times. But he's a part of an offense that does not want to hyper fixate on one single name. As long as he keeps scoring touchdowns and he gets involved in the red zone, he should be a fine flex play. But there's a scenario here where he is worst case scenario for your wide receiver room, right? So proceed with caution. But the good news is you see all my rankings for every wide receiver in this video. So you'll know exactly where I stand for your fantasy football team. Now on the opposite side of things, JJ McCarthy is ruled out. So this will be Carson Wentz. And, that was better for Justin Jefferson. We can all agree that was better for Justin Jefferson last week. At least we had Justin Jefferson come out here and had 75 yards, no touchdown, but that's encouraging. But here's the bad news for Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison is now introduced into this offense that's a little bit murky. So not only do you have to compete with Hawkinson now, but you also have to add Jordan Addison to the mix. Now you can make a case. Maybe that helps Justin Jefferson. Maybe the defense isn't able to focus on him as much. I do have Jefferson as a must start. I just don't see how you sit the guy. But Jordan Addison is going to make things a little bit difficult. Addison himself, I would rather see it before I believe it. I mean, you're not even trusting Jefferson as much as you used to, at least not with the same type of confidence. So I labeled Addison as a risky start, meaning at this point, you can put him in there, but it's a little bit of a Hail Mary play because there's so many unknowns. Okay, this brings us to the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games on Sunday. We've got the Commanders at the Falcons. 45.5 point over under. The Commanders are favored. Now, At the time of recording this video, we still don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to play or not. He is currently labeled day to day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through all the scenarios that could possibly happen this week and tell you what it would mean for fantasy football. So here's the deal. Regardless of what happens, if Jaden is out there, if Terry is out there, Deebo Samuel is a playable name. You can put him in there. There's enough scripted plays for Deebo for you to be able to rely on him in your fantasy football lineups, even if it's just a flex. However, if Terry McLaurin plays and Jaden Daniels is out there, Terry McLaurin, I would prefer a little bit less than Deebo Samuel. I would still prefer Deebo just because of the inbuilt scripted plays for a Deebo Samuel. However, Terry McLaurin was so close to a broken play last week, close to the touchdown. Now, we don't know if Terry McLaurin himself is going to play because he's currently dealing with a quad injury. So you're going to need to monitor that as well. However, if they're both playing and Jaden Daniels is out there, they're both flexible names with, let's say, relatively lower floors because the Falcons defense, or the Falcons offense rather right now, looks like a bit of a shit show. Sorry, excuse my French, family friendly. But hopefully the Falcons can figure this out. So these wide receivers in Washington will be needed a little bit more. Good news is it can't be worse than last week, right? Well, Drake London is still going to be a must start for me. I know it did not look great last week, but London was still able to salvage his day. He had 7 targets, even though Mooney led the way. He was still a usable fantasy name. Now, he and Michael Penix, not on the same page. Michael Penix needs to come back, fire on all cylinders. Here's the good news for Michael Penix. Probably his best game ever as a pro was against Washington last year. So maybe he has a little bit of familiarity with this defense, even though it's new players. I wouldn't start Darnell Mooney. I think that's too risky, but you can start Drake London with confidence. Okay, let's talk Saints at Bills. This is one of 3 matchups tied for the highest over-under of the week. That's the good news. Vegas is anticipating a lot of fantasy points in this matchup. So again, that is the good news. Here's the bad news. This is the largest spread of the week in favor of the Buffalo Bills. In fact, this is the largest spread of the year. It's 16.5 points. The Bills are favored by 16.5 points. I'll tell you what I love about that and what I don't. What I love about that is it means Chris Olave is going to be targeted throughout this game no matter what happens, right? Last week, in an absolute blowout, Chris Olave had 13 targets, caught 10 of them for 57 yards. This could be a similar situation. That's cool. That's what you could see from Olave again on Sunday. So yeah, there's not this huge ceiling of a 30-point game, but you have a safe floor for Olave. He's in play as a spot start. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, I am concerned that this could be what we saw in week 2 with the Buffalo Bills versus the Jets, where it's such a dominant game that both Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman are just not even needed. So I have labeled them risky starts, which makes them more of a Hail Mary play. 95% of you guys have a better option in your flex. I know it's a good matchup, but they might not be needed at all, and that worries me a lot. Okay, let's move to the Browns at the Lions. 45.5 point over under. Second largest spread of the week in favor of the Lions. Lions are almost 9-point favorites to the Dogs, as in the Cleveland Browns. Okay, right, you get it. Now, it's a good matchup for the Brown wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. The Lions give up the 6th most points to fantasy wide receivers. So in that way, you can kind of paint a picture like maybe this is a good matchup. They're probably going to be down. They're probably going to need to throw the ball. But that's been the vast majority of games this year. And it's been difficult to trust either Jerry Jeudy or Cedric Tillman on a week-to-week basis. I've labeled them both a risky start. Now, the difficult part about Jerry Jeudy is he and Cedric Tillman are playing just as much as each other. They're not favoriting one or the other. They're both getting just as much opportunities. One week it'll be different than the next week. So these guys are both desperation plays at best. Guys who could easily have under 10 fantasy points, especially if they don't get into the end zone. Unfortunately, Jerry Jeudy is not the player that we drafted him to be. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, you can go ahead and start Amon-Ra St. Brown with the utmost confidence. Clearly, it didn't matter what this coaching staff was saying in the preseason. Didn't matter that they said Jameson Williams was a breakout. We can't wait to see Jameson Williams play. Oh my God, he's going to be so good. Because they have no intentions to target Jameson Williams. On Monday Night Football, first drive of the game, 2 catches for 40-plus yards for Jameson Williams. Nothing else again. So unfortunately, Jameson Williams is still in the boom-bust category. Can you guess who I had in the Flock League on Monday Night Football. Can you guess who let me down? Who's the reason I lost? Well, it's not Jameson Williams' fault. It's John Morton's fault. It's the Detroit Lions' fault. Don't talk Jameson Williams up like you did and pay him to barely use the guy. Rant over. He is a spot start at this point. He's boom bust. If you have a more reliable option, I don't blame you for playing him. If you don't, you can put him out there. He might get you 50 yards and a touchdown. He might get you 3 fantasy points. I'm not sure there's an in-between for Jameson Williams this year. And of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a must start each and every week. I'm sorry. It's a weak spot for me. I'm still upset about this week. I lost in very, very sad fashion. Okay, Titans at Texans. This is the lowest over-under of the week. Okay, so not only is it the lowest over-under of the week, which is not a great news for the Titans wide receiver room, but it's also the third largest spread of the week in favor of the Texans. So it is going to be really difficult to rely on any Titan wide receiver here in week number 4. Let's start with the Texans, though. So Nico Collins, of course, a must start. Titans are a top 5 matchup for your wide receiver. That's all great. But at the moment, it looks like Christian Kirk was far more important than any of us might have realized to this offense. Christian Kirk in week number 3, his first game back, he was second on the team amongst the wide receivers in snaps, in routes run, and targets. He had 8 targets compared to 11 for Nico Collins. Very clearly, they always had a role in mind for Christian Kirk. I'm going to put Kirk as a risky start. You know, if I had to choose between Kirk, Ellick, and Calvin Ridley, for example, I'm going to play Kirk because Kirk seems like a more integral part of the offense, a more scripted part of the offense. Now, in PPR formats, that's where I would lean. But still, Kirk himself is a Hail Mary play at this point, right? We still need to see him involved in the game plan and it being successful. Now, what could be a concern for the wide receivers in Houston is game script. Because is this a scenario where they're such heavy favorites where they're dominating this game and they don't need to use their wide receivers? Because that could be really bad for Nico Collins and a Christian Kirk. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, I would not really tell you with any confidence to start Alec Manor or Calvin Ridley. I mean, if you have to start one at this point, how do I not tell you to start Alec over Calvin Ridley? Back-to-back weeks where Alec Manor is the one in the end zone. He's the one on the broken plays where he gets a touchdown, and there's just this real chemistry with him and Cam Ward. Meanwhile, there's zero chemistry whatsoever with Calvin Ridley. He caught 1 out of 6 or 7 targets, it was. Okay? I don't know how I'm going to tell you to start Calvin Ridley with any confidence in any matchup this entire season. So, proceed with caution. Okay, let's go to Panthers at Patriots. 43.5 point over under. The Patriots are favored by 4.5 points. In this matchup, the only thing I can tell you to do with the utmost confidence is start Tetairoa McMillan. He's my wide receiver 16. He's clearly the number 1 target here in Carolina. And he's also an incredible player. He's absolutely fantastic. Think about it. In a game that the Panthers won 30-0, he was still targeted 9 times. That's a great sign of things to come. So you can put T-Mac into your lineup. Outside of that, maybe Hunter Renfrow is more important to the offense because Jatavion Sanders is going to miss multiple weeks with a high ankle sprain. So maybe over the middle of the field, they want to use Hunter Renfrow a little bit more. That's a Hail Mary play if you want to go after it. Maybe it's more of a DFS play. But on the opposite side of the ball, I don't know how you trust any New England Patriots wide receiver. I really don't. Because it seemed like Boutte was the obvious breakout name after week number 1. Here's the good news. Boutte is still running, or Booty, whatever, is still running the most snaps, the most routes run. But it's not converting to any serious target share. He had 1 target in week 2, 3 targets in week 3. Stephon Diggs is still being outplayed by Mac Hollins, barely involved. Demario Douglas still has a role. I just don't know how you trust any wide receiver in this room. And it doesn't help that the Panthers are the 3rd worst matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. So steer clear of all Patriots in the wide receiver room in week number 4. Okay, Chargers at Giants, 45.5 point over under. The Chargers are favored by 5.5 points. Now, this is the opposite of the previous matchup we looked at because there's a bunch of green on the board here. You can start Keenan. You can start Quinton. You can start Ladd McConkey. You can start Malik Neighbors. Shoot, if you're in a desperate spot, I think you can put Wan'Dale Robinson out there, right? Now, at the moment, keep in mind, the Giants are debating what to do at quarterback this week. There's a possibility they could change things up. They could move Russell Wilson out of there. However, I would be surprised personally if they do that this week, going up against a good defense like the Chargers. So that might be in another week from now or so. Now, regardless, I don't think it can get worse than Russell Wilson. So if it's Dart, if it's Jameis, I'm still going to play Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale as a flex option, Neighbors with a lot of confidence. Don't let last week put you off Malik Neighbors, okay? Don't be completely blinded to what you saw multiple weeks ago where he had 37 points. Put him into your lineup. They're going to get him more layups, I promise you. Now, with the Chargers, this is the second best matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. Second best matchup, okay? Keenan, smashing it this year. The number one target in this offense so far through 3 weeks. You got to play him. Quentin Johnston, absolute superstar so far. A top 10 wide receiver in fantasy points. Ladd McConkey, the guy that we all drafted high, he is the one that is not coming through so far for your fantasy football rosters. I would love to tell you that, hey, this is the week where things change. This is the week where Ladd McConkey is more important to the offense. But why? They keep winning games and in convincing fashion. I think this is how we're going to see this wide receiver room deployed. Now, Ladd McConkey is going to be great. Let me be very clear. He's going to be great. There's going to be plenty of games where he's much better. But the reality is, between Keenan, Johnston, and McConkey, they're all going to be playable names each and every week, but one or two of them will be underperforming each and every week as well. Like, there will be a regression to the mean for Keenan. There will be a regression to the mean for Quentin Johnston. Johnston's on track right now for 17 touchdowns. He's not going to end the year with 17 touchdowns. There will be regression for all these names, and regression to the mean is both positive and negative. There will be positive regression for Ladd McConkey. He will get more involved. So because it's such a great matchup, I can't tell you what's going to happen with this wide receiver room, but I can tell you if I had these names, I would be starting them with confidence. News is constantly changing in the NFL, and so are my fantasy football rankings. The 2025 season pass is your secret weapon for the season. $34 one-time purchase when you use my promo code LAND. It's about $3 per week for the rest of the season. You get unlimited access to my rest of season rankings, my weekly rankings. As soon as I hit submit, you'll know where I stand. You get some vouchers to come on our live stream and ask us questions, as well as all the premium tools on the Flock site. So check that out in the comments below if you're interested. Okay, Eagles at Bucks. AJ Brown, we tried to encourage you guys, hey, don't panic on AJ Brown. This is going to be better. There are good signs. And finally, both him and Devonta Smith had great games versus the Rams last week. I think these are guys that you're putting into your lineup and you're playing them, okay? Devonta Smith, I'm a little bit more worried about AJ Brown than AJ Brown, but still Devonta Smith is a flexible name, my wide receiver 28. On the opposite side of the ball, we're not going to see Mike Evans this week. He has a low-grade, hamstring injury. We'll have to monitor that. I think he'll be out more than what Todd Bowles is leading us on to believe. But that makes Emeka Egbuka a must start. You have to start Emeka Egbuka. I don't care how small your league is. You could be in an 8-team league. He's got to be in your lineup. And it's also great that they can put him inside, outside. He's got so much versatility in this offense, but he will be the number one weapon for Baker Mayfield. Now, outside of that, Sterling Shepard is technically the next man up, so you can play him if you're in a difficult position. He has a lot of chemistry inbuilt with Baker Mayfield from their days at Oklahoma, but what you might see as well is more utilization of a Rachaad White, a Bucky Irving, a Cade Otton. So be careful to just dedicate your week to Sterling Shepard as well. Okay, let's go to the start of the afternoon slate of games. We've got the Colts at the Rams, 47.5 point over under, a really healthy number there. Vegas anticipates a lot of points. The Rams are favored by 3.5 points at home, but this should be a great game. I'm so excited to see Indiana Jones and Matthew Stafford battle it out in Los Angeles. I wouldn't have it any other way, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here's the good news for Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. Alec Pierce is in concussion protocol, so that does make the wide receiver room a little bit less confusing to project on a week-to-week basis, right? I mean, you look even last week, Alec Pierce was second amongst wide receivers in snaps with 31. Second amongst wide receivers in routes run and targets. So at least that opens up the way for a Josh Downs to be relevant, for a Michael Pittman to be relevant, maybe even Adonai Mitchell. So Pittman definitely, I think, is a startable name. I imagine the Rams offense is going to get going and they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. So Pittman's probably going to be a good play. Downs is a riskier play, but in deeper leagues, you can play him as a flex. And then on the opposite side of the ball, Like I have said, in week 1, in week 2, in week 3, you play both Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, and you do it with the utmost confidence. Puka Nacua, my probably 101 at this point if you redid a fantasy football draft. If he's not the 101, he's at least a top 3 pick. You can't sit him under any scenario whatsoever. Okay, let's move to the Jags at the 49ers. I don't want to talk about this matchup because it's going to be difficult, but we need to. 45.5 point over under. The 49ers are favored. Let's talk about Brian Thomas. Another week, another underwhelming performance. Here in week 3, he led the way in snaps, routes run, and he had 6 targets. Now, one of those targets he took for 40 plus yards, and that, I'm not going to say saved his day, but that's where the majority of his 7.5 fantasy points came from. This coaching staff has not given up on him. I have not given up on him. I know I might be on an island right now when I say this, but I still think the vast majority of you guys out there who drafted Brian Thomas, I'm sorry, I just don't see you having a better name on the waiver wire. I don't see you starting a Trey Tucker over Brian Thomas, a Sterling Shepard over Brian Thomas. I just don't see you doing that. I couldn't do that. I still believe in what we saw last year from Brian Thomas. Now, maybe he's not going to finish as a top 10 guy. Maybe that's top 20. But he should get back on track. Now, this doesn't help my case at all, but I want to be honest. I want to be transparent with you. Shout out to Kyle Borgononi from the Footballers. He said, since 2000, Brian Thomas Jr.'s 28% catch rate is the lowest of any wide receiver to see 25 plus targets through 3 weeks. 522nd out of 522 eligible wide receivers. Same thing I said last week. This is Trevor Lawrence's fault. This is Brian Thomas's fault. They're both at fault. Okay. And it doesn't help that you have Shane Waldron calling plays, or at least part of the offense. You never love to see that, but I just can't sit the guy. I'm sorry. If you want to, I get it. You see my rankings. He's a spot start for me. He's my wide receiver 26. You can flex him. If you have a better name, trust your gut, but I still want to put him out there. And maybe this is me giving him one last shot. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, Ricky Pearsall, a spot start. Brock Purdy has a chance to play this week. So the good news is, even with the injuries that Mac Jones is dealing with, Brock Purdy should be good to go. Ricky Pearsall, breakout season. We're starting to see it. Now, Juwan Jennings, he's currently day-to-day with an ankle injury, so we don't exactly know if he's going to play. But if he is going to play, both Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, some of the best flex options that you can possibly have. The Jags are a top 7 matchup for your wide receiver. Now, if Jennings is out, Ricky Pearsall is going to be going to a must start for me. He'll be changing from a spot to a must start, especially if Brock Purdy is healthy. Okay, we've got Ravens at Chiefs up next. This is one of the 3 matchups that are tied for the highest over-under of the week at 48.5 points. The Ravens are favored by 3 points. Now, what happened on Monday Night Football was really the reason why we were so hesitant to draft Zay Flowers this year. So far, we have been wrong, and we've eaten our humble pie. But we have told y'all, hey, there are plenty of boom and bust games in store for Zay Flowers. And unfortunately, this is an offense that doesn't mind spreading the ball around, that doesn't mind allowing Derrick Henry to run the ball on the ground plenty of times, right? But you saw that on Monday Night Football. They said, Hopkins, you get some targets. Bateman, you get some targets. Mark Andrews, welcome back. And if we're going to get more Isaiah Likely involvement as well, Zay Flowers, I have him as a must start. Don't get me wrong, because I love the over-under. I love that chasing that matchup. But we could see plenty of boom busts for Zay Flowers moving forward. Now, on the opposite side, my rankings are showing as if Worthy will not play. Okay, so if Worthy is not out there, you can start Hollywood Brown as a flex. You can even, Tyquan Thornton can be a desperation play. He's actually been pretty decent. But if Xavier Worthy plays, it makes everything way more confusing. If Worthy is out there, I don't know how you trust Hollywood. I don't know how you trust Tyquan Thornton. Honestly, I don't even know how you trust Worthy, because if he actually gets hit with that shoulder, he could be out any single play. So definitely proceed with caution with that wide receiver room. Okay, let's move on to the Bears at the Raiders. Rome Odunze has emerged as the number 1 wide receiver. Hopefully you bought in on him during the draft season, one of our favorite breakouts of the year. He goes up against the Raiders here week number 4, a top 3 matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. So this love train could just keep on rolling for Rome Odunze in week number 4. He's my wide receiver 12 this week. DJ Moore, more of a spot start, because he's just not as involved in the offense naturally. But I do think because of the matchup, you can play him. Luther Burden and Zacchaeus, I would not chase anything from last week with Luther Burden. Now, obviously, as a Luther Burden stan, it was awesome to see him get more involved. However, it's not like his actual snaps and usage was higher than it typically was, right? I mean, you still saw him playing behind Olamide Zacchaeus. He only played 17 snaps, only ran 9 routes. So I would be really cautious to chase that. He's a stash. He's not a play. On the Raiders side of the ball, I do think Jakobi Meyers is a playable name. I imagine the Bears will be up in this game. And the good news is for Jakobi Meyers, the Bears are the 4th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. So I imagine they're going to have to be throwing the ball from behind. That's great for Jakobi. Trey Tucker, back-to-back games, over 8 targets. He's a Hail Mary play. You can totally put him in your flex if you don't have a better option. He's kind of like the more disgusting Tyquan Thornton, if you will. Harder to trust Tyquan Thornton. But he's not a bad Hail Mary play. Okay, let's move on to Sunday Night Football. We've got Packers at Cowboys. 48.5 point over-under. Again, one of those games that's tied for the highest over-under of the week. The Packers are pretty heavy favorites, understandably so. Now, here's the deal. I do think Matthew Golden is a startable name. He's a flexible name in this matchup. What we saw last week was a further increase in his involvement. So Matthew Golden was second on the team in snaps, routes run, and actually tied Dontavion Wicks for the most targets, but touched the ball 7 total times. They also got him involved on the ground. And it was the first time in his career he eclipsed 10 fantasy points. I do think you're going to see Matthew Golden's role grow more and more over the course of the year. The good news for him is the Cowboys are the best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. So if any game he's going to break out, it could be this game. But outside of Golden, I mean, Dobbs could have a game, Wicks could have a game. It's just really tough to trust this Packer wide receiver room in general. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, while it is not a great matchup for George Pickens, the Packers are actually the 5th worst matchup for your wide receiver. The good news is Pickens is going to be the undisputed number 1 weapon in that passing attack for the Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, CeeDee Lamb out with the ankle injury. He might go on IR. We'll have to monitor that. So you can put Pickens into your lineup with confidence based off of volume alone. I don't think you should start Jalen Tolbert, but he should be stashed. And if you're in a deeper format, 16, 18, 20-man league, then I think he's a flexible name in that type of scenario. All right, that takes us to Monday Night Football. We've got the Jets at the Dolphins, the first of a doubleheader. I know some of you guys love these doubleheaders. I'm happy that you do. I'm not a fan, but I'm not going to complain about football. 44.5 point over-under. It's a pretty close spread. 2 of these teams, they're both defeated, as in no wins. They're combined 0-6. So somebody's going to walk away with a win, okay? That's what we need to be looking at here. Now, Garrett Wilson, a must start, obviously smashed last week. Even though Justin Fields was not in the game, he was still absolutely incredible, dominating target share. 12 out of 33 targets, right? Incredible stuff. Walked away with the touchdown. 10 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown. And that's, with the backup, Tyrod Taylor. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, I do think that you can start Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They are showing more signs of life with their passing attack. And while the Jets secondary has been really scary in the past, through 3 weeks, they're actually the 12th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver anyway. So I do think both Tyreek Hill is in play and Jalen Waddle. Of course, I would trust Tyreek Hill more than Jalen Waddle, though. Jalen Waddle is more of a flex. The NFL season is just getting started. I'm so excited for week number 4. I just submitted my latest DFS lineup on FastDraft's Quick 6 Super Slam. Here's what we're rocking with. We've got Puka Nacua versus the Colts, James Cook versus the Saints. I think he's going to go crazy. Marion Hampton versus the Giants. Those 2 running backs, I cannot wait to put them in my lineups this week. Roma Dunze at the Raiders, Nico versus the Titans, and how about Cam Scatterbo versus the Chargers without Tyrone Tracy? I'm rocking with those guys in my lineup. You can make a lineup yourself. All you have to do is choose 6 non-quarterbacks. The highest scorer each week wins the most money. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you'll get my week 4 rankings completely free. Check that out in the description below. In the last game of the week, we've got the Bengals at the Broncos. Broncos are favored heavily by almost 8 points, tied for the 3rd largest spread of the week in their favor. Last week, we came on this video and we told you guys, hey, here are the splits without Joe Burrow for Jamar Chase. Here are the splits without Joe Burrow for T. Higgins. And a lot of you guys left comments being really upset, saying that doesn't matter. Look at what Jake Browning did in week 2. And then I was seeing people on Twitter tell you guys, actually, this is probably good for Jamar Chase that they lost Joe Burrow. Look at what Jake Browning did. I couldn't wrap my head around it, truthfully. When you lose Joe Burrow, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, one of the best decision makers and quickest releases, one of the greatest minds in the NFL right now, it's going to hurt your wide receivers. However, to bring some sort of life to this conversation, I do think they're going to be much better in week number 4. They can't get much worse. They're going to have a better game plan coming in. Jamar Chase is still a must start for me. He was the one that had the safe floor, in week number 3. He didn't completely bust in your lineup. However, T. Higgins is more of a spot start, my wide receiver 37. So you'll see my rankings throughout this video. You can check every player that you have and see if I would start T. Higgins or not. But I would be very hesitant. He's more of like a last second flex than a name that you have confidence in, right? On the opposite side of the ball, you're going to start Courtland Sutton with a ton of confidence. We all know that. Put Courtland Sutton in there. Don't think about it twice. I know a lot of people were questioning him after week number 2, but in week 3, he came out there and absolutely balled out. I'm actually anticipating a huge game for Bo Nix, Courtland Sutton. I think Troy Franklin might have a nice little game as well. So Franklin's a risky play. He's a Hail Mary play at best. But man, I think we could see a lot of points from this matchup. I think it's a sneaky one. And man, I'm excited to see it all go down. Guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love, subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.